we're back. This is Elliot Serrano and Jose Melendez coming to you from Dreamland Comics in Schaumburg, Illinois. Thank you for joining us here on CCW TV, the Comic Culture Warrior video channel. Okay, so we're through the looking glass, people.
Yeah.
Because we just spent the last segment pretty much ripping a DC book, which is kind of unusual for us.
No, yeah, it is, but it's been building up with me for a while.
It's been building for a while. And something else that's kind of building, that is going to surprise folks, is the surprising amount of pretty quality product coming out of Marvel, which you guys think we hate, but we don't. And as a matter of fact, one of our favorite creators, Jonathan Hickman, not only has he been given the reins of Fantastic Four, but he just started a new book called S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. with art chores by Dustin Weaver. Now, this book is kind of, I want to say it's kind of like an Elseworlds type thing.
If it's not, okay, go on.
Yeah, I want to say it's an Elseworlds type thing because what's going on in S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't feel like main 616 continuity. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have an Ultimate banner on it, so it's not an Ultimate book. So it looks like Jonathan Hickman is being given a chance to just kind of play with concepts of the Marvel Universe and do them in his own sort of, oh, wait a minute. I could be wrong. I just realized something. Because, anyway, it's the history of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's like the secret history of S.H.I.E.L.D. and what S.H.I.E.L.D. has meant to the Marvel Universe for years and years and years. And Jonathan Hickman it constructs this whole history, much like he did in Secret Warriors, when he played with the whole relationship between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, and showing that they were all they were both the same organization.
Right.
For the most part.
Which could be a theme, because they do bring up, because in Secret Warriors, wasn't it S.H.I.E.L.D.
and Spear.
And Spear.
Right.
And Hydra was the Spear. And then that's part of the origin of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right.
is the S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Spear.
Exactly. Yeah, because at one point you do find out, they do allude a bit to the Spear. And the Spear lies in the east, whereas the S.H.I.E.L.D. lies in the west. Mm-hmm. A lot of really cool stuff happens in here. I mean, first...
And if you're history buffs, you're going to love this guy.
If you're a history buff, it's one thing. If and I was reading this and I was going, you know what this is? This is an adult Marvel comic. Mm-hmm. See, because it dealt with such really sophisticated themes that cause you to think, very sophisticated language and dialogue. Yeah, there is a lot of history. You have to have kind of a passing knowledge of, characters like Imhotep, Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo. If you knew about them, if you were paying attention in, history class, you're going to appreciate this more. And there's not a lot of there's no violence, I call it adult, not because there's graphic violence or nudity or anything like that, but because you really have to have a very mature sensibility to appreciate it. And this is the kind of book that I wish we could see more of, as opposed to those books like Kick-Ass, and, and I know I keep bringing these up, but the books that we call mature and pushing the envelope, that they're trying to be edgy,
are some of the most immature.
Really, and if anything, they put comics back. This, on the other hand, pushes the envelope.
Well, that's what Hickman's been doing with Fantastic Four and with Secret Invasion. I mean, Secret Warriors. He's been doing that already. And reading this reminds me of Pax Romana. This reminds me of an indie Jonathan Hickman book,
right, in
the Marvel Universe.
Well, this is him taking that voice, that vision of his that he had in the indies, and bringing it to the mainstream. Mm-hmm. I remember we had a conversation about this a while back when it came to how Marvel was taking all these indie creators and bringing them in, but kind of homogenizing them, kind of making them just more mainstream creators, kind of like what's happened with Bendis right now. He's really lost that voice that made him special and different in the indies. Mm-hmm. Hickman, though, yeah, you're right. He's able to, bring his style of narrative into this, and, you would think that it wouldn't work in a mainstream book, and yet it does. And I'm going to say this. I mean, Hickman, his dialogue and his pacing can be very dense, and sometimes, it can kind of, you might be thinking, oh, come on, enough with the history lesson already. Dustin Weaver's artwork in this book is gorgeous. I mean, it is just amazing to see that there is somebody out there who has these images in their head. And this was really awesome. This book is a gift to Marvel Comics fans because they're able to.
Now, whether they're going to accept it or not is something entirely different.
You're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right because the book sold out here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that it gets received pretty well.
We didn't order conservatively. It's a new #1, and Jonathan Hickman's been doing really good with Fantastic Four and Secret Warriors. But again, it's like there wasn't really a lot of stuff out there. I've seen the ads, and it had something to do with the Marvel Universe, but we didn't really know what it entailed.
Right.
And again, at the end of this book, we don't even know if it's in the Marvel U. You don't really know what you're getting.
Well, there's some, again, flashing through the history of S.H.I.E.L.D., you see that S.H.I.E.L.D. does have different, linchpins throughout history that are, kind of held firm by important historical characters. We find out that Leonardo da Vinci, it's essentially Leonardo da Vinci, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool the way it's done.
And then you have, all these people who you mentioned are agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then you have, wasn't it Galileo?
Who had to take on Galactus somehow. Yeah. So there again, Hickman throws all these ideas into this first issue that could be the basis for entire miniseries, but he throws them all in this one issue, and then we have the appearance of agents Richards and Stark,
and in the 50s.
In the 50s, and you're like, wait, okay, is this an Elseworlds or an alternate, or are these like the predecessors of the Reed Richards and Tony Stark that we know today? So it's just really cool. It's just a cool book. In fact, what I loved about this too is that
it could be very much because this is going through the generations of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And generations of the Marvel Universe.
Exactly. So that does make sense. That could work.
It's cool that this book had that feel that I loved so much from Captain Britain, where it was that really funky science fiction, mind-bending, cerebral stuff that I really liked. But, of course, Captain Britain had a very English feel to it. Mm-hmm. This has a solid American feel to it. And it's very comforting to know that that we have some really good science fiction writers working in comics right now. Jonathan Hickman is a superior writer. And his matchup here with Dustin Weaver is just really, it's mind-blowing.
No, I didn't know what to expect from this comic. Obviously I was going to buy it because it was Jonathan Hickman, but I wasn't expecting it to be this awesome. I couldn't really expect what I didn't know what to expect from it, and it completely completely took me by surprise, and I wasn't expecting any of this stuff to happen in here. And
and another thing I had to mention, it's a $3.99 book, 32 pages of art.
Yeah.
It had a lot going on in there. So it was one of those issues where you really got your money's worth out of the book.
Yeah, and I think it's time for Leonardo da Vinci to get his own comic. Like after reading this.
Well, wasn't that Hudson Hawk? Wasn't that the movie Hudson Hawk?
Is that what it was?
It was like based on Leonardo da Vinci.
That movie was terrible.
It was. Another book that came out as well that kind of dabble on similar ground, but on its own. Turf by British talk show host Jonathan Ross, and artwork by Tommy Lee Edwards, who I remember most recently from 1985. 1985, the Secret Wars sequel that he did with Mark Miller that I absolutely hated. So
artwork was nice, though.
Oh, the artwork was gorgeous. The book itself, I couldn't stand.
Right.
So you picked this book up, and Jose said, you got to read this. It's really good. And I said, okay, I'll pick it up. I took it home. It's an Image book, $2.99.
$2.99.
Another book with like 30-some pages of artwork, because I tell you, Jose said to me, pick this book up early, take it home and read it at home because it's going to take you a while to get through it. And great googly moogly, did it take me a while to get through it. This didn't feel so much like a comic book
as an illustrated novel.
As an illustrated novel.
That's
like
exactly what I thought. Yeah.
A pulp novella.
Yeah.
It was like a pulp novella. Because you have Prohibition in the 1920s in Manhattan, okay? You have vampires, a vampire mob moving into 1920s Manhattan trying to take over the mob. And then, if that wasn't enough for you, you have a crashed spacecraft.
Yeah, from like aliens who are running from like
they're also
they're thieves.
They're bootleggers. They're gin runners too.
Exactly.
They're also dealing in
and then on top of that, you have another story going on with a female journalist who really wants to make that story break into and like help bring down pretty much all the gangsters that are going on.
She looks at corruption in the city and wants to bring it down. So you have this whole this whole mishmash of genres being put together here, and you can see, this is kind of a fine line that you got to walk here. Because I can see pairing mobsters and vampires. That I can kind of see. When you drop in the aliens, though, not that vampires aren't pushing the incredulity quotient, but, the aliens coming in, you're like, huh? I read this first issue. It's really jammed with a lot of exposition. A lot of exposition. I wanted to, if I can just point out here, and this is something that, and I know with Jonathan Ross, with Image, they let you pretty much do what you want to do. But as a writer, I am very much discouraged from writing very dense panels like this one here, where you have like upwards 15. Like yeah, there is a lot of dialogue, and the word balloons are just chock full of words. That after a while, I'm telling you, I had to like turn away from it for a bit because Workman here, the letterer, John Workman, really had his work cut out for him in lettering this book. There was a lot of stuff going on in there that he had to fit in there, and this is not a book that you can read sitting on the can. I'm telling you that right now. But for the most part, for a first issue,
unless you have food poisoning that day.
For the most part, I don't want to think about that, man. For the most part, it worked for me in the beginning. The dialogue was just a wee bit clunky. It felt very movie-ish.
Well, this is the first comic.
It's the first issue, right? Yeah, so I'll give him that.
Jonathan Ross has been a geek forever. Everyone's known. Right. I mean, he loves comics, and this is actually the first comic I think that he's ever written, as far as I know.
It picks up pretty well. Picks up later on in the book, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with issue number 2, because for me, there are a lot of disparate elements that are thrown together, all these different ingredients that are put in the pot, but they don't quite have time yet to boil and start making that stew. I'm hoping that in issue number 2, the elements do start coming together and we start.
Well, I think that they do, because the last page pretty much tells you where all the characters are at that point and how they're going to start. I don't know. I just read about some of this stuff on the internet. Like, this book was coming out, and I do like Tommy Lee Edwards' work a lot, his artwork. I watch Jonathan Ross's stuff on YouTube a lot whenever he's got guests on there that I like, and I think he's pretty funny. So I was gonna give this book a try no matter what, but I was not. I wasn't. When you think that a celebrity is gonna write a comic, you think like, all right, it's gonna take me 5 minutes to read it.
Right.
I was surprised by how much information was in this comic, and I'll tell you one thing: for a first issue for $2.99. I'm not going to complain at all about that because everything that I read, at no point was like, oh my god, come on, get on with the fucking story already. At no point was I like that. I was just like, it was very intriguing to me. All of these different captions, there's 4 storylines going on here, and just you find out so much about these characters in this one issue, than you probably would have in 5 issues of a Mark Millar comic. Seriously,
there is a lot of screen time, you would say, devoted to character development. And it's not just so much these things happen to extend the plot or advance the plot.
And it helps that all the characters in themselves were interesting enough to for me to want to read everything that was going on with them.
Right.
So this is very surprising to read this and to enjoy it as much as I did. And again, it's going to take you a while to read this. This book is not for everybody. If you like Kick-Ass, do not buy this book because you're going to fucking hate this book because you're going to actually have to read and comprehend what you're reading at the same time.
This book has a very pulpish feel to it.
And that's another thing. I mean, you have all these the genre bending going on, and it just all works so well in this first issue that I'm like very excited for this series now. So
to me, again, like I said, there are a lot of different things that when you read this, you might be left scratching your head, but a lot does go on. Ross figures out a way to come up with these little common elements to put, again, the three genres together. You have gangster movies, you have vampire movies, and you have science fiction. And he figures out elements of all three to make them come together, and it's really a clever storytelling device that he uses. To me, right now, though, I want to see what happens in issue 2 before I really go, okay, this is what it, one way or the other. And it's a limited series too. It's issue 1 of 5. My guess is he has a nice full story arc. I will say this.
I mean, this could have easily been the first 5 issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on in here. I am blown away. I'm astounded at thinking where he wants to take this by issue 5. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure the pace is going to quicken a lot more, but he just needed to establish everything. And I have to give the creators props for doing that. Instead of like we just talked about with fucking Blackest Night, everything's just so distilled and everything, and just to give you this, I want to compare this book to how surprised I was when I read Do More #1. All the information and the info dumps in there, but it's all necessary and it was all enjoyable. And that's kind of what I compare this book to. That's kind of where it came from. I don't want to talk about that.
Did you read the afterword?
Yeah, I did.
You read it?
It wasn't that bad.
Now, I will say this. It was funny to have Mark Miller call himself out when it came to decompression, too. So, Mark Miller writes the afterword, and...
Which is funny, because the afterword in Nemesis was nauseating. But I read this, and I'm like, this isn't actually that bad. This is actually Mark Miller's actually kind of sounding sincere. And calling himself on his own bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is more the real Mark Miller here.
I hope that is.
I think it's more the real
I want to see more of that Mark Miller, then.
Yeah, so would I. I thought it was kind of funny to see that. All right, folks. When we come back, we do have some more books to look at, and a couple more reviews, and of course, we always have last rants. See you then.